Hi everyone, welcome to Backstage Whispers, a podcast that is part of the Green Room Recovery Project where I will be talking about performers, passions, and the battles we fight behind the curtain. I'm Elisa Hernandez, and I will be sitting down with artists while we talk about navigating recovery while also having a full-time performance career. Just a quick heads up, every episode, including today's episode, will be talking about eating disorders and different eating disorder behaviors. So if this will trigger you, I will be putting down a timestamp where you can fast forward to and you can listen along. So today I am joined by myself. I will be sharing my stories about having an eating disorder and being a performer, and also just more insight about the project and why I decided to start it in the first place. First question is, just tell me more about yourself, who you are, and why I decided to start this project. I have struggled with an eating disorder for about 8 years of my life, including now. And I have always felt like having an eating disorder has had a big impact on my life in regards to being a performer, but also just in my day-to-day student life. Eating disorders do have a lot of implications and impact on anyone, no matter their career path and no matter what stage of life they are in. And being someone who has experienced it from a young age now to a young adult, I wanted to talk about my journeys and also just I want to spread awareness to eating disorders and have everyone know that you are not alone when you are struggling, especially in the entertainment industry where you are, where eating disorders are normalized and eating disorders are very much prevalent and a lot more common than you might think. I started this podcast. It is actually part of a school project that I am doing for my Young Artist Project, which is the equivalent to a junior year, senior year thesis for all music students at USC. But I am planning to expand it just beyond the scope of this project because it is something that I have been wanting to do for a long time, and it is something that I believe is very important, and I want everyone to be able to join my community and join this community here in the Green Room Project and really learn about eating disorders and learn about recovery and why it's so important. So like I said, I started this project my junior year of high school. I've been actually thinking about starting this project ever since I was a freshman. When you audition for USC and you go in for a major, you have to give an idea of what you want your young artist project to be. And my original idea was a scientific project about perfect pitch and, the ability to match pitch, but that was a lot more sciencey than I think that I wanted to go. And I just kind of started losing interest in doing it. And because my eating disorder was such a big part of my life and such a big part of my performing career, I wanted to really bring that to light. And admittedly, I was very scared and nervous about starting this project because it meant that I would have to be very open and very vulnerable about my struggles and being open and, everyone online and all of my friends and mutuals knowing about this part of myself. But I knew at the end of the day, a lot of people are struggling and someone has to start talking about it, and I decided that I would be the one who would start talking about it. So here we are with Backstage Whispers and the Green Room Recovery Project. Next question is just a little bit more about my eating disorder journey. Again, trigger warning to anyone who is struggling with an eating disorder. I will be talking about some of my eating disorder struggles and my behaviors. I will not be going super in depth and I will not be including numbers, but I want to be mindful of the fact that eating disorders are very competitive, and if you think that any of my mentions will be triggering to you, please skip forward to the time that I list to hear more without hearing about any of my behaviors. So I have always struggled with body image growing up. I grew up as a dancer, so I was a very active kid. I also played sports. I played soccer, basketball, a little bit of lacrosse in high school, but my main thing was dance and soccer. And so like I said, I was a very active kid, and I was also growing a lot faster than a lot of the girls in my grade and a lot of the boys in my grade, so it kind of made me a little bit self-conscious. I was always on the taller side, just developing faster than the other kids, and there are a lot of physical differences that come with that, and I definitely think that that was one main trigger for just my low self-esteem and my body image issues that started when I was young, maybe 10, 11, so definitely started when I was very young. When I was about maybe 13, starting 13, I was, more mindful of what I was eating, more mindful of food, what I put into my body and everything like that. So while I wasn't having a full-blown eating disorder, I definitely was showing signs of disordered eating when it came to just overly obsessing over the food that I was eating, how much food I was eating, the calories, the macros on everything, nutritional value, all of that. So starting at a very young age, I was definitely already showing signs of just restriction, and to the point where it was a little bit unhealthy because I was restricting myself so much from just everyday foods like rice, pasta, bread. I just already had it in my head that they were bad foods and I didn't want to put them in my body. So like I said, starting at a young age, started restricting. And then when I was in high school, freshman and sophomore year, it definitely progressed. I was definitely restricting a little bit more. I was, skipping breakfast, having a smaller lunch, the usual things that I feel like most people think are harmless, but they're actually not. They actually are harmless. They are definitely not harmless. They are harmless. Definitely don't do these things. I was, supplementing some of my meals with protein bars and things like that. And then when COVID hit in March of my sophomore year, I grew a lot more insecure about myself and the way that I looked. Something I didn't mention was in my freshman year of high school, my PE teacher used to weigh all of us kind of in front of each other, and that was already something that I was super uncomfortable with. And I remember coming home one day crying to my mom because my PE teacher was weighing all of us, and then I couldn't do 10 push-ups, and a couple months had passed since the start of the year until then, which is second semester, and she's like, "Oh, you're so unhealthy because you can't do 10 push-ups." And I will forever remember that moment and how it really affected me, because even though it was no direct correlation to my weight or what I looked like at the time, because I was already so insecure about my body and how healthy I was, it definitely made a huge impact on me, and it was something that I wouldn't say triggered or made it even worse because I already was experiencing all these behaviors, but it definitely didn't help the situation that I was in, and it continued on a downward spiral from there. So starting sophomore year, when COVID hit in March, I was completely in online school, and I think Zoom school definitely didn't help because I was constantly looking at my face, and my face was and still is one of my biggest insecurities. And I was just looking at it, and I was thinking about how round it was, and my cheeks looked big, and all of these things, and just all of these little insecurities that shouldn't matter but really mattered to me and meant the world to me. And I thought that it defined who I was in high school, all by this little picture of my face online that probably no one was paying attention to, but I was. And also at the time, because of COVID, I had to film a lot of auditions for different competitions that were happening, and I used to do it with my front camera so I could see what I was doing and I could make sure I was in frame. And then it kind of got to the point where I had to start using my back camera, because there was one time I vividly remember recording myself and I could not stop looking at myself. I thought that, not in a vain way, like, oh my god, I'm so obsessed with myself. I was just so insecure with the way that I looked, and I didn't want the judges to see that. I thought I looked so ugly, and it was horrible. And I just remember crying and thinking, will I always think about myself like this? Will I always think that I'm not beautiful? Will I think that I'm always ugly because I'm unhappy with the way that I looked? And I thought, for me, the only way to change the way that I was feeling and the way that I looked was to do something drastic, which for me was developing an eating disorder. So during my junior year of high school, again, I was entirely online. Keep in mind, I was already experiencing a lot of stress and self-esteem issues with being online and having to see myself. Also, I was going through a lot of changes just within my life, whether it be changes with friends. My social life was obviously changing because I was not allowed to really see anyone. And there were a lot of good things happening my sophomore year. I was, captain of the JV lacrosse team and doing all of these leadership things, and then all of that came to a stop. So here I am, my junior year, turning 17 years old, and I thought that my life was, out of control. I was doing absolutely nothing aside from doing Zoom school that was stressing me out, and then the other time not really doing much. So it started off as me, skipping meals, and then eventually it led to me making myself throw up the meals that I was eating. So I had lost a little bit of weight in a short amount of time. And then it just kind of continued from there. I went from restriction to throwing up my food. And then I went through another period of heavy restriction where, again, I lost a lot more weight, and to the point where it was a little bit concerning. From a BMI perspective, I was not considered underweight, but from the amount of weight that I had lost within those months was concerning. I was making sure that I was getting checkups, and my doctor noticed, making weigh myself and everything, because there are a lot of negative impacts and consequences that come with having an eating disorder and making yourself and restricting yourself, one, and also binging and purging and, making yourself throw up, which I will get into a little bit later once I'm done completely talking about my behaviors and the way that I am. So, yeah, lost a lot of weight. I remember my parents being concerned as well. Everyone in my family, like, are you okay? And I said, no, I'm not. I think that I have eating issues, and we immediately went to go try and find a therapist for myself to help me get out of this situation. Unfortunately, because during COVID, there was a big uptick in people who were struggling with their mental health, specifically also with engaging in eating disorders, I don't know if I wasn't considered to be sick enough or what it was, but I had one consultation with a doctor at a very big private university here in the Bay Area. Probably know what it is, but I'm not going to name it. And I was on the wait list, and I finally got a consultation for one of their doctors. She diagnosed me with anorexia, and I believe anorexia, binge and purge type, whatever. And then they kicked me off the wait list without telling me. So I was kind of left for a couple months without knowing what was happening, which wasn't great. And yeah, and then senior year hit. I wasn't getting any treatment for a long time. Because I was taken off the wait list, it made me feel very invalidated with the way that I was feeling, so that was not a great feeling either. During my senior year, we went back to school, and I was engaging a lot more in making myself throw up. I was going from being completely not active to the complete opposite. I was the lead in the school musical. We were doing Legally Blonde, and I was Elle Woods, and it was one of the best experiences of my life, but it was also a time when I was probably struggling the most, and no one knew except for me and my mom. So that was definitely very difficult as well. I was struggling really badly with bulimia at the time, and as you can guess, bulimia does have a lot of physical side effects and consequences, especially as a singer, because you're throwing up, you're damaging your throat, your vocal cords. I was getting very tired very fast at every rehearsal. Luckily I wasn't having memory issues at the time. So I was able to memorize everything, but it was definitely very hard to sing, stay active, be able to dance and sing at the same time, act, stay in character, all of the things that you have to think about while you're standing on stage and performing. It was just so hard to do. It was a lot harder than it should have been. And while I will always say it was one of the best experiences of my life, it was also a difficult experience. Not only is being the lead of a musical a difficult experience, but having to be the lead in the musical while also battling a very severe eating disorder that affects you mentally and physically made it a lot harder of an experience for me. After Legally Blonde, I was doing a little bit better. I was in a relationship, and I thought some of the self-esteem issues were getting better because some part of me felt validated that I was liked by someone else, to the point where we were dating and all of that, and it was a very good time. We were dating all the way through summer. I was still battling on and off with eating problems. Same thing, I was dealing with restriction and purging at the same time. So it was definitely a hard experience come my freshman year. I feel like everyone kind of has a difficult time their freshman year because you are going through a lot of changes. I moved to LA. I was not used to it. I was long distance with my boyfriend at the time. It was very hard. And my eating problems actually got a little bit better, I felt, because I was, stuck just eating dining hall food. I didn't really buy any extra food for myself because I was very conscious about money and, why would I pay for more food when I already have food for free? Well, not for free, you have to pay for a dining pass, obviously, but why would I pay extra money when I already am paying for food? Yeah, it got a little bit better because I didn't have all this food accessible to me. I was, full schedule with classes and all the things. And then the summer after that came. My boyfriend and I at the time ended up breaking up, which was hard for me to deal with, but I think the extra hard part about it was the fact that I relied so much of my self-worth and my happiness on that relationship and not seeing that in myself. And so when it came to be my sophomore year, I struggled again a lot worse than I was already doing before that. And this time I was in my own apartment and I was having to buy my own food. I was trying to navigate a new college life for myself when I was trying to build my solid group of friends and find myself at college finally in my sophomore year. And it was very hard for me to do because so much of myself was debating whether or not I don't want to say a good person. I know I was a good person, but I think I didn't know what my worth was and I didn't understand self-love, and I wanted to find that within myself because I don't think I've ever had that, which was a very tough and difficult thing to do for anyone who's been on a self-love journey. It's hard, and finding your own self-love and finding self-esteem is very difficult, and it's more difficult than one would even think. So I was kind of going through that, and then the summer going into my junior year, I was still struggling. I was throwing up multiple times a day, if not every day. I was not eating properly. At the same time, I was in 2 operas. I was in Cherubin, which is a French opera, my fall semester. And then I was in The Juniper Tree my spring semester. Not only that, I had a brand new voice teacher who I was scared of in the best way possible. He was amazing and he will forever be one of the most influential people in my life. But yeah, I always wanted to impress him, so I put a lot of pressure on myself to be a better student and to be a better singer. But when you are struggling with restriction and purging, your energy goes through the door and you basically have none. So all of the energy that I had was basically dedicated to trying to get myself around campus and then to throwing up, which wasn't great. I was not doing that well in school. Not only that, my singing was horrible. I couldn't memorize any of my music. There's actually a story of me in October. We were performing German arias and I had to sing a 5-minute long aria, and I was having nightmares about this because I knew that it wasn't properly memorized. Like I said, a lot of my energy was dealt in the bathroom throwing up. So all of that time I should have been practicing, I wasn't. I was either doing that or laying in bed because I was so tired and in pain. So wasn't memorized, having so many nightmares about it, cramming right before that performance. And what happens when you cram, you forget it all. So I stood up on stage and I forgot everything. And I was standing there for 5 minutes, saying whatever words I could remember in German. Some words weren't even in German. I don't know what I was speaking. And yeah, it was super embarrassing. Both my German teacher was there and the chair of my department was there and my professor was there who is fluent in German. So yeah, it was a very disappointing experience for me. I was not only were my professors disappointed in me, which is already a hard thing to deal with, I was disappointed in myself that I let myself get that far. Knowing that I was putting my career and my school journey at risk by engaging in these behaviors was horrible, and it was a horrible experience, and it was a horrible thing to realize. Just quickly, so I'll get through all of my behaviors. I almost went to residential this summer going into my junior year. Residential is inpatient, so you are typically in a hospital or in a home where you're being monitored 24/7, which is the kind of care that I needed at the time because I was purging so much. And it's a very compulsive behavior. Sometimes you think about it beforehand, but a lot of the times it just happens. And you can't help it. You have to do it, or else you feel like, for me at least, I thought that I was going to gain so much weight, and I thought something terrible was going to happen to me. And I remember crying to my mom one time. I was like, I can't keep this food in my body. And like, that's scary. So obviously when you're dealing with something as severe and as controlling as that, you need to go into 24/7 care. I begged and begged and begged my parents not to send me, because I didn't want my eating disorder, something that I was letting happen to myself, control my life and control the good things that were happening in my life. Towards the end of my sophomore year, I was having such a good time. I'd finally established my close group of friends. I was going to be studying musical theater in the next semester with a brand new teacher, because I knew that opera kind of wasn't right for me. And I just felt like I had so many good things coming for me, and the thought of all of these things going away because of this was one of my worst nightmares. I did not want to take a semester off. I did not want to put my life on hold. I wanted to keep going. So after begging a lot for my parents to not send me to residential, they let me go back to school, but I did online intensive therapy with a new program, which has helped me a lot. And definitely I think that, recovery is not linear. Recovery doesn't just happen like that. Something that, my therapist and my dietitian both remind me is that you have been struggling for an eating disorder for 8 years, and thinking that you can get rid of it in a couple months to a year is just honestly a little bit unrealistic, because you've been training your brain to be thinking about this all the time. And not only that, but for me, it was during very influential, important developmental periods in my life. So it's kind of like you have to rewire your brain in a way to be healthy and think healthfully, and to be able to even be healthy. The amount of times when I've eaten the size of a normal meal and have felt sick to my stomach have been crazy. And that is just a part of the recovery process, because your stomach just doesn't know how to process and handle all of that food. And I'm here now, still struggling, but it has definitely gotten a lot better. That's just a lot bit of my eating disorder experience. So how that has affected me as a performer, it has definitely impacted me a lot. I had the hardest time memorizing music, especially in college, when I was having to learn 6 separate arias, plus all of my choir music, which was about 20 pieces, plus a full opera a semester. It was a lot of music, and that's not easy for anyone who is majoring in performance or music, regardless of their personal and emotional, physical health. Someone who is completely healthy, that is a lot of music. And for me, not only was it a lot of music, it was a lot more music than I have ever had to memorize in my career. And then on top of that, I was unhealthy. So part of the reason why I had such a hard time memorizing that German aria was because of my eating disorder, because I could not memorize anything. I couldn't memorize German, French, English even. Every single language was hard, and every pitch was hard, every note was hard. And then on top of that, because memory's hard, the act of actually singing is also hard. I couldn't take full enough breaths. My stamina was so low. I felt like passing out at rehearsal sometimes. And even during my voice lessons, I've had to cancel some of my voice lessons because I felt so tired and so lightheaded and so exhausted, which, again, not a healthy thing and not a healthy way to live. So yeah, I think that eating disorders have a huge impact on people emotionally and physically, whether or not they are performers. Some people can't even get out of bed. I was lucky enough to be able to walk to all of my classes, but when I was in online treatment, I almost couldn't walk to class. Not because physically I was able to, fine, but if my health keeps going downward, my doctor didn't want me to walk to school. Could you imagine not being able to walk to school? That's horrible. And you think about all of these daily tasks that you do every single day. Make your coffee, make your breakfast, lunch, and dinner, go hang out with friends, eat out with friends. Those are all things that you can't do anymore when you are this far along in an eating disorder. There have been so many times when I have not been able to eat out with my friends, or when I'm out, I'm not present. That's another thing that the eating disorder has for any person. It takes you away. You barely are a person anymore. You have no energy. You have no sense of identity. You have no sense of self. You have no self-esteem. You're always anxious. You're always thinking about food. You're not really cherishing the relationships that you have because your mind is always on something else. With having to deal with all of that, again, it was just another push for me to want to choose recovery and want to make the choice and to really put in the effort and work to recover and get better, because I didn't want this life for myself and I wouldn't want this life on any other person. I think as a performer, we definitely do struggle in a bit of a different way than most people who are struggling with eating disorders. And not to invalidate anyone or say that anyone who is struggling with an eating disorder has it easy. That is not true at all. We all have it hard. This is one of the most deadliest mental illnesses ever. I want you to remember that. Deadly. And having to recover from that is not easy. And also being in an environment where it is normalized and glamorized and pushed is even harder to deal with. I don't know why people think that having an eating disorder is a glamorous or good thing, and I don't know why they would ever promote it for other people to deal with, because if you have dealt with an eating disorder, you know how painful it is to have to go through that with every waking hour of the day. When you're a performer, you have a certain expectation of yourself, and other people have a certain expectation about you. Whether or not they are allowed to have those opinions is up to you, but directors have opinions on what you should look like to fit the character. Other castmates might, the audience members might. Do I think that that's okay? No, of course not. Audiences should not be making comments on people's bodies, people's talent, anything like that, but they still do, and it's something that we're still working through as a society and something that hopefully will change. But right now, that's just the world that we live in as performers, constantly having to be in front of camera, doing photo shoots, all of those things, and you're having to constantly see yourself. It can be so damaging. If you are already feeling unhappy with the way that you are looking, of course you would go to lengths to change that, because you want to keep doing this career. If you have a director telling you that you need to lose a certain amount of weight, you might want to lose that certain amount of weight. But the one thing that I want you to remember is that there are healthy ways to do it if you really, really think that you have to, but also you don't have to take that role. If a director or someone is not going to see you for the person that you are and not accept that, then maybe that's something to consider too. My message to anyone who is struggling: I hope that you find it in yourself, find the strength to choose recovery and choose a new way of life. It's not an easy thing to do. It's probably the hardest thing you're ever going to have to do, because this has been ingrained in your mind for so long. And these behaviors feel normal to you. And the thought of changing those behaviors is very scary. But please remember that in engaging in any kind of eating disorder behavior, you are also damaging your body. And you are damaging the career that you have worked so hard to build. We've come so far if we are studying it in college and beyond. Even when you're in high school, there's a lot of dedication and time and money you have to put into the performing arts. And we do it because we love it. And don't let your dream die because of this. It's possible. Recovery is possible. Recovery is worth it. And I think that if you want a long and healthy career, that this is the way that it has to be. And I think if you want a long and healthy life and a happy life, it's what you have to do. I've noticed such a big difference between myself a couple years ago and me now. I feel like through your recovery journey, yes, you have to deal with the food behaviors and all the thoughts, but you also go on a journey of self-love and finding yourself and finding your identity that I think is so cool and so important. And honestly, it's so important for anyone. It doesn't matter if you're struggling with an eating disorder or not. I think that this journey of self-love and this journey of healing is so important and so necessary for a person who, wants to have a long life with lots of healthy relationships, if you want to start a family and, have a partner, you need to find that strength and self-love within yourself before you give that love to someone else. Also, at the same time, how do you expect someone to love you when you don't even love yourself? It's a journey that I went through my eating disorder recovery, and I still am going through. And, I'm in a happy and healthy relationship now where I feel loved because I love myself. I feel like I can give a lot of love to the other person in the relationship and vice versa. To anyone who is not struggling with an eating disorder, maybe you are in the performing arts. Maybe you're an artist yourself. If you do find yourself as a performer or artist, you maybe isn't struggling, be mindful of the fact that you are most definitely with someone in your cast or have a friend who is struggling. So I think it's always important to stay mindful and stay educated about the way that they are feeling, because I think that having a sense of sympathy and or empathy for them is super important in their own recovery journey. Recovery is not easy. People don't like to ask for help, but being that help for them, whether or not they think that they need it or want it, is still super important and will go such a long way for them. And also, I think that it's just the more people that know and the more people that are supportive of people who are struggling just kind of opens up the conversation for people to talk more about their eating disorders and to talk more about how it should not be glamorized or admired within any industry or within society at all. That was a lot of talking for me today, and this will definitely not be every podcast will definitely not be like this. I just wanted to share more about my story because I am the one who is spearheading this project, and I started this project, and I think that in order for other people to be vulnerable, I have to be vulnerable as well. So here I am telling my story, and I really hope that if you guys have made it this far and listening, you enjoyed it, you learned a new thing or two, and you learn a little bit more about yourself. To everyone listening, whether or not you are struggling with an eating disorder or not, or just having a little bit of a hard time with your relationship with food, please know that we see you and we are here for you. I would never want anyone to keep struggling the same way that I have, and I sincerely hope that you find it in yourself to find support and better your relationship with food and yourself. If today's episode spoke to you, I would really appreciate if you left a comment, left a review, and followed my Instagram at the Green Room Recovery Project and my TikTok at Green Room Recovery Project, where I'll be posting a lot more content and a lot more videos about just getting to know me, the behind the scenes things of my podcast and all of that. And I really hope that, you guys follow and you continue to support me in this journey and to continue supporting the other people who will be on this podcast, which I'm super, super excited about, and I can't wait to have you. If you are interested in being a part of my podcast, please fill out the Google form, both in the link trees in my Instagram and TikTok bio. The nice thing about my podcast is that you have the option of staying anonymous or having your identity revealed, depending on what your comfortability levels are. I totally understand if you want to help other people, but you are not comfortable revealing that you are struggling with an eating disorder. Totally okay, but I do urge you to think about how much your story can impact you and other people as well. I don't even have to know your identity. You can just fill out the form, and then I will be reading aloud the responses that I get. Thank you so much for staying, and I will see you in 2 weeks for the next podcast. Bye. See you later.